All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. I'm sure more people are gonna stream in, but we have a few announcements before we get to the substantive part of today's webinar. First of all, welcome. This webinar is brought to you as part of Boulder County Senior Law Day 2021, the day that's so good that it's become longer than a month. We are virtual for our informational sessions this year. There are a few differences. Today's webinar is being recorded. The video is going to be available later on the Boulder County Senior Law Day website and our YouTube channel. I'll put the links for both of those in the chat. The host has muted all participants, so please remain on mute. We are going to have a great opportunity for questions today, and our speaker today has agreed to take some questions during his presentation. So when you think of a question, please type it into the Q&A or the chat box. And there are a couple times where he will be inviting questions as well. So please don't be shy, ask away. We have upcoming webinars every Tuesday and Thursday until October 7th. So all of these webinars are from noon to 1. Our next one is September 28th, and that is going to be John D. Kontz from Jorgensen, Brownell, and Pepin, talking about being a fiduciary and what that role entails. And then on the 30th, we'll have Deirdre Braverman of Braverman Law Group talking about special needs trusts, an issue that's come up several times in some of our other webinars so far. So those are really great topics, and I'm really excited to learn more about them. And you can sign up for those on our website, which again, I will be posting in the chat. We are very excited that we are adding an in-person Ask a Lawyer clinic this year. The Longmont one has already passed, but in Boulder, this Saturday, September 25th, we will be hosting an in-person free legal clinic from 9 to noon at the Boulder Agewell Center at 909 Arapahoe. That's right behind the library, if you know where that is. There is parking, masks are required to attend, and it's a really great opportunity to get a free consult with an attorney and really learn a little bit more about an issue that you've got pending in your life. So please, please, please join us for this, get some advice. These two clinics are the first in-person clinics that we've had in the county since March of 2020. So please take advantage of this. If you are unable to make the clinic and really have a pressing legal issue, I do want to bring your attention to the virtual legal clinic that our platinum sponsor, the Boulder County Bar, hosts. Callers get paired with an attorney for a brief legal consult on a variety of issues. So to sign up for that, you can either call the Bar Association or apply online through their website, and I will be posting that in the chat as well. Finally, I want to bring your attention to Senior Law Day Handbooks. Those are available online at seniorlawhandbook.org. Or if you have a cell phone handy with a camera, you can wave it in front of that QR code that's on your screen right now, and it will bring you directly to that website. And you can download it just like you would the menu at any restaurant, which I find very exciting. Finally, I want to thank our sponsors, our platinum level sponsors, Boulder County Bar Association, Pearl Fiduciary Services, and Fraser. Our gold sponsor, Jorgensen, Brownell, and Pepin. Our silver sponsor, Hofgaard and Associates, and Bach Financial Private Wealth. And bronze level sponsors, Kingsbury, Lovett, Johnson & Love, LLC, and Friends of Longmont Senior Services. And with that, I am gonna turn things over to our speaker, Michael Dougherty. He is our district attorney in Boulder County. In 2018, he was when he first began this job for the 20th Judicial District. And in November of 2020, he had the honor to be reelected. Definitely a trying time to do law enforcement, and we are so lucky to have him. Our district attorney's office is committed to enhancing community safety and improving the justice system. Michael attended Nassau Community College, then went on to graduate from Cornell University and Boston University School of Law. Having had the opportunity to see the work that our district attorney's office does, I am just so honored to get to introduce him and to turn the reins over to him, because compared to many other communities, our RDA's office really does work towards our community and for our community, and really promoting justice in a way that I don't think we see many places. So thank you so much.
Well, good afternoon. And Brett, thank you so much for that kind introduction. I greatly appreciate it. And I just want to take a moment to thank Brett and her colleagues for the work they do. I miss being together for Senior Law Day. And as you may recall, if you've joined us in the past, Brett and her colleagues put together an incredible celebration along with informative discussions at the Jewish Community Center. And we would have a couple hundred people there. And it was a great, great event. But it's a testament to them and their commitment to this community that they made a successful transition to conducting Senior Law Day online. And as Brett noted, increase in the number of presentations that we provide to the community online, despite these trying and challenging times that we're in. I'm honored to serve as your district attorney and excited to talk with you today about elder abuse. And the goal of the presentation will be to provide a brief overview of the office, but also when we talk about elder abuse, talk about warning signs and red flags that you and your loved ones can look for to make sure you're not victimized and older folks in your family or circle are not being victimized. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Brett, can you see my PowerPoint slide on the screen?
Not quite yet.
Okay, so let's try this. How about now?
Yes, it's on. Thank you.
Perfect. So the next slide we have here is the overview of the presentation. I am going to talk briefly about the DA's office and our mission here for those of you who don't know what we do on a regular basis. And then I'm going to transition to talk about elder abuse, which is such a significant and troubling occurrence. And it happens far too often throughout the state of Colorado and across the country. And it obviously carries with it dramatic and serious consequences for the victims and for their families. So for that reason, those cases are a priority for the district attorney's office. But to me, it's not enough for us to simply respond to the crime after it's happened, but to actively participate in conversations with our community to prevent these crimes from ever taking place or touching anybody in Boulder County. It's why in our office, we have an amazing group of people working in our community protection division. They focus on crime prevention. And when we do have an elder abuse case, they're the folks that respond and work on those cases to ensure that justice is done. I'll talk today about some of the predominant issues that we face in our community when it comes to elder abuse, some current trends we're challenged by, and also what we could do to protect those in our families and in our community from ever being victimized. And finally, the importance of prevention, reporting any suspicious or fraudulent activity, and then the emphasis that we place on successfully prosecuting those cases to ensure that justice is done and that we're upholding the safety of the community and doing right by the victims. At the district attorney's office, we have jurisdiction over all criminal offenses committed within the 20th Judicial District. There are 22 elected district attorneys throughout the state of Colorado. I have the great honor of being the elected DA for Boulder County. And of course, one of the great things about being district attorney, and there's a long list of great things actually, but one of the great things about being district attorney in Boulder County is the diversity of the areas and communities we have within the county. So you have, of course, the city of Boulder, city of Longmont, Louisville, and so on, which are significant metropolitan and suburban areas. And then we have more rural areas in our own community, Ward, Nederland, and so on. And then lay on top of those, the University of Colorado at Boulder. So we see a fair amount of challenging and interesting cases. For that reason, we have 90 members of staff, 35 or so are prosecutors, and we have 11 criminal investigators, and then a host of outstanding public servants in non-legal roles within the office. I'm glad they're outstanding public servants because we have 11,000 cases per year, which may come as a surprise to you, given that Boulder is such a safe and wonderful community. I really feel lucky to be a resident of Boulder County and to be raising my kids in Boulder County. But 11,000 cases per year keeps us very busy in the district attorney's office. Approximately 8,000 of those cases are misdemeanor or traffic offenses. Misdemeanor cases can range from shoplift or trespass, all the way up to and including low-level sex assault cases or physical assault cases. Then we also have, of course, felony cases, which number on average about 3,000 per year. And the felony cases range from felony theft, which is a theft of anything over $2,000. So $2,000 is the cut point past which if someone steals something in an amount greater than 2,000, say for example, a really nice bike, that would be a felony theft, all the way up to sex assault and homicide cases. We have 2 offices in Boulder County. Both are located within the 2 courthouses in Boulder County. One is here at the where I'm sitting right now at the Justice Center in downtown Boulder. And then we have another office up in Longmont in the courthouse building up in Longmont. The Longmont courthouse handles any misdemeanor or traffic offense committed in Longmont itself. All felonies committed in Longmont are transferred down here and handled here at the Justice Center, along with all the other cases from throughout Boulder County. The mission of our office is to enhance community safety and improve the justice system. There are people, especially now, who view those as 2 opposites, that you can either work on behalf of public safety or you can work to improve the justice system. I think that's a Hobson's choice. I actually think enhancing the community safety and improving the justice system are interwoven and go hand in hand. In that, we have a significant portion of the community who do not trust law enforcement or the justice system. They are less likely to report when they've been victimized or observed a crime, less likely to cooperate as witnesses or victims in a case. And if they come down for jury service, perhaps they're less willing to believe or assume that someone might be credible who's a police officer or a prosecutor. I think if we can reach those people, and it's why we put such an emphasis on community outreach, if we can reach those people and have conversations with them and answer their concerns and address their questions, we could build more trust in what we're doing here in Boulder County in this justice system. And by that, we are then able to actually achieve justice in all those cases where they might previously been unwilling to cooperate or participate. So we put a strong emphasis on community outreach and trying to ensure people in the community know a lot about our office. So we're very transparent and accessible. And it's not unusual in Boulder County, since people are highly engaged, for people just to reach out to us directly, which I love and I encourage you to do. If you have questions on a case or you read something in the paper and you have a particular concern, do not hesitate to reach out to us, because we want to share the information that we have going on throughout the office and on our cases and so forth. When it comes to our cases, our mission is to do justice in every single case, and that means achieve the right outcome. We are by no means perfect, but we're committed to doing the right thing in every case, not racking up convictions like notches in a gun belt, but rather seeing what we can do to address the needs of the victim, the community, and the accused, to ensure that the person is less likely, the offender, is less likely to come back to the justice system again. And I'll talk in a moment about the programs and efforts that we've developed to help people get back on the right track or to a better track, and to reduce the likelihood of reoffense. I will share with you that the most troubling aspect of the justice system in the state of Colorado, from my perspective, is the rate at which people are returned to state prison within 3 years of their release. So if you look across the country and you look at the rate of return for people being released from state prison, being back in state prison within 3 years, here in Colorado, we are in the bottom 10, among the 10 worst states in successful rehabilitation of people coming out of state prison. Roughly 50% of all people released from state prison are back in state prison within 3 years. And I view that and call that a failure rate. There's nowhere else in your life that you'd go and accept a failure rate of 50%. If you were signing up to go to school at CU and I told you, hey, good news, only 50% of the students fail out every year, you would say, we need to completely overhaul that university. Or if you went out to dinner tonight and when you entered the restaurant, someone said, good news, only 50% of the people here are unhappy with their meal and don't like the food, you would turn around and leave. So our office is actively engaged in sentencing reform in Colorado, and I have the honor of serving as the co-chair on the Sentencing Reform Task Force. But also the outstanding staff within our office continue to push forward programs that will improve the justice system, and as part of that effort, reduce the likelihood that someone's going to return to the justice system. So our restorative justice and diversion programs are making a real difference. I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but I wanted to just highlight we have 3 separate programs within restorative justice and diversion. Here's a key takeaway for you. Actually, two. I'm going to give you two key takeaways. The first is the reason we're able to successfully divert so many cases in restorative justice and diversion is because of volunteers from the community. We have over 65 engaged, active volunteers in our restorative justice and diversion program who helps facilitate the discussions and the case resolutions for the victim, the offender, and the community in our restorative justice and diversion program. That's number one. And if you're interested in volunteering, I encourage you to take a look at the district attorney website for information on how you can enroll to be a volunteer in our restorative justice and diversion program. Number two, we have a 92%, let me say that again, a 92% success rate in restorative justice and diversion. What does that mean? That's a good question. The 92% success rate means that 92% of the accused who go through the restorative justice and diversion program successfully complete the program, which requires them to accept full responsibility and accountability for their actions, repair the harm to the victim, and comply with any treatment requirements if they're struggling with, for example, substance abuse or mental health issues. For every one of those 92% of the cases that are successfully completed through restorative justice and diversion, we then dismiss the case, which means the person goes forward in their life without having to carry the collateral consequences that make it so hard to obtain a job, housing, or education. We want to help people get on the right track so they could break the cycle of behavior that may have brought them into the justice system in the first place. So one of the key things I wanted to share with you is how many cases we've been able to divert since 2016. It's actually now over 2,700 cases. We're diverting so many cases that we've had a 300% increase in the amount of cases going through diversion. And one of the key things I want to share with you, and you can see it on the slide right there, when you think about that 50% failure rate for state prison, compare it with the 9% recidivism rate that we have in our diversion programs. And also, and very important to me as a prosecutor, and I've been a prosecutor my entire career since 1997. When I see that the victim satisfaction rate is 99%. There are a lot of victims who just want to see the harm repaired and the individual get on the right track so they don't reoffend. So we've been expanding our restorative justice and diversion program to also include a mental health diversion program. We are currently the only jurisdiction in the state of Colorado that has a mental health diversion program. And it's because we are passionate about recognizing people who have mental health needs, who are struggling with mental health disorders in the community, may find themselves in the justice system. And we need to evaluate and treat the needs that are bringing them into the justice system as opposed to having them cycle in and out of the jail over and over and over again. Like the gentleman that I referenced in the second bullet point here. He was arrested over 100 times in 2019. Think about that. 100 times in a year. Those are obviously all low-level offenses. Otherwise, he wouldn't be back on the street the day after the arrest. But those low-level offenses were having such an impact on the community, his neighbors, law enforcement resources. And for every single one of those arrests, he was being brought down to the courthouse, public defender or attorney being assigned, prosecutors working on the case, court reporters, judges, and so on. That's the reason why we have the mental health diversion program in Boulder County. And it's why we're so proud of our efforts in that area and why we want to expand those further. The only challenge we have, it's a significant challenge, but the only challenge we have is funding. What we do in that program is we evaluate whether someone's suffering from a significant mental health disorder. And if they're on an eligible offense, we then divert them out of the jail. Because the last place someone should be who's struggling with a mental health disorder is a jail cell. So with the cooperation and strong partnership with Sheriff Pelly and others, we set up the mental health diversion program so they're diverted out of the jail and connected with treatment in the community. Like the gentleman that I referenced who had over 100 arrests in 2019, after being connected with and helped through the mental health diversion program, he was arrested once in 2020. Think about that and the impact for him, the community, and also taxpayer resources. We also have the only Fresh Start warrant forgiveness program in the state of Colorado. And we actually continued the Fresh Start warrant forgiveness program even when the pandemic hit, and we did it virtually, which was incredible. But basically what this program is for individuals who miss court and have a warrant issued for their arrest. We have the courthouse open as business as usual on a Saturday. We do it twice a year. And people can come down to the courthouse and clear their warrants and either resolve their cases, like the 73 people who came on a Saturday. They had 97 warrants resolved. All of these individuals are still living amongst us. It's not as though they're on the run or hiding out somewhere. They're going to work every day or taking care of their kids or what have you, worried that they could be arrested and taken to the jail overnight. And when you think about the law enforcement resources and the resources at the jail, this program helps everyone. And it's been a great success. And I'm excited to share with you that Jefferson County is in the process of adopting this program now as well. So on the screen, there are some of the initiatives we have, and I'll just touch very briefly on a couple that I haven't mentioned yet. The Immigrant Protection Program we have in Boulder County to help the immigrants who live in our communities. It's been in place. My predecessor, Stan Garnett, who did a terrific job as district attorney, he had set up the Immigrant Protection Program. We've added resources to that program. And if you're interested in more information, I encourage you to reach out to us. We also engaged in, starting in 2019, in an effort to make sure that we identify racial inequities in the system. We were chosen as one of 3 district attorney's offices in the country by the Vera Institute of Justice to do a deep dive data analysis to identify where racial inequities exist in our justice system. Notice I didn't say if, I said where, because I have no doubt that the data analysis will show that we have racial inequities in the justice system here in Boulder County. The difference between Boulder County and other jurisdictions around the country is that we're going to do something about it. And that's why we partner with the Vera Institute of Justice. Those racial inequities exist throughout the criminal justice system in all parts of the country. Because as long as we have racism in the United States, we're going to continue to see those racial inequities flow into the justice system. But as district attorney, I think it'd be a mistake for me to say it's something else that we have going on in society. It's not our responsibility. I think we have to own, to the extent we can, the impacts that we see here in the justice system. And certainly over the last year and a half, it's been demonstrated how important this kind of work is to the people of Boulder County and throughout our country. So in 2019, we had partnered with the Vera Institute of Justice, and I'm excited to share with you that they're nearing the final stages of their analysis, and I'll share this report that they produce with our community. We also started the Bias and Hate Crimes Initiative in 2018. The reason we started it when I took office as district attorney is that in 2016, which was a presidential election year, we saw a dramatic increase nationwide in hate crimes being committed. So we started the Bias and Hate Crimes Initiative. We have a lot going on here in the district attorney's office, but I just wanted to take a few minutes to start to share with you some of the programs that we have in place and the kinds of cases that we're working on.
And Michael, we actually have a question already for you.
That is great. What's the question, Brett?
Was the 100 arrest individual homeless?
Good question. And he was homeless during part of that year. So part of what the mental health diversion program was able to do was connect him with more stable housing. And I think that's part of the reason we've seen such a dramatic reduction in his law enforcement contacts throughout 2020 and since then.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for that question. And if you have other questions, as Brett indicated, I'm always happy to do my best to answer questions very directly. So feel free to put them in the chat box or the Q&A, and I'll continue to answer as we go along. Thanks, Brett. So what is elder abuse? You can see the definition there on the slide, and I'm not going to read it to you. I will say that we see these cases all throughout Colorado, and crimes against elders in Colorado by law are folks 70 or older. And these crimes do carry more severe penalties than crimes against the general population. So for example, if I were to open my statute book, you'd see theft, and then you see theft from an at-risk adult. So it's actually a separate offense, a higher level offense than general theft. So since I'm not yet 70 or older, a crime committed against me involving theft would be a simple theft. If you're 70 or older or have a loved one in your family, or if my uncle, for example, who's 85, were victimized, to be a separate and higher level offense. So who are victims of elder abuse? These are some things I just wanted to touch on right at the start. It really could happen to anyone. And so often, as you'll see in just a couple minutes, these crimes are committed by someone known to the victim. But it's 1 in 10 Americans who are 60 or above report having some form of elder abuse. As indicated on the slide, you see 2/3 of elder abuse victims are women. Black, Latino, poor, and isolated older adults are disproportionately victimized. And nearly half of the people, nearly 50% of people with dementia, suffer from some kind of abuse or neglect by their caregivers. So who's perpetrating elder abuse? Who's committing elder abuse? And I think this is a really important slide for us to focus on, because what you see there on the slide is how few elder abuse offenses are being committed by a stranger to the victim. So you see there, the largest piece of the pie, 40%, are adult children. So the children of the victim. Spouse is 15%, grandchildren 9%, and so on. The point here is these crimes are being committed by people known to the victim. It can also include caregivers, staff at nursing homes, or other facilities. In over 75% of the incidents, the perpetrator is a family member of some kind. And you see there adult children, spouse, grandchildren, other relatives, parents, siblings, and so on. So many pieces of that pie are family members who are related to the victim. That's a hard part of these conversations, because people never want to believe those in our families are hurting us or taking things without our permission, but it does happen. And we'll talk towards the end of the presentation about some of the red flags to look for. But going into it with the knowledge that these crimes are almost always committed by a family member should help you and should help your loved ones. When you're wondering what to do, you should think to yourself, I need to respond. I have to do something. That's the takeaway here. And then 1/3 of cases reported to Colorado statewide adult protective services involve self-neglect. So where does elder abuse occur? Throughout our entire community. There's no community immune from elder abuse. And even though Boulder County is a wonderful and safe community in which to live and to play, we have elder abuse cases in Boulder County on a fairly steady basis. So you see there on the screen, private homes, businesses, group facilities, nursing homes. It can happen anywhere. But the important thing about this that I wanted to stress is 71% of the cases in Colorado involve individuals living in community homes. But by that, I mean homes with a relative, someone in their house in the community. And 21% involve individuals living in facilities. So again, that really emphasizes that a lot of these crimes are being committed by individuals in the victim's family. So here are some stats that I took from 2019. I'm just going to hit on a couple things. We had 613 cases handled by this office in 2019 involving elder abuse or neglect. 28% of those involved physical assault. 16% financial fraud or exploitation. Another 16% stalking or harassment. And then you see assorted crimes falling in that 26%. But the important number on this slide, from my perspective as your district attorney, is that we had 613 cases in 1 year. So keeping in mind that of those cases, a lot of those cases involve more than one form of abuse or neglect. So usually there's crossover with these numbers here. But keeping in mind that as long as we're trying to take care of our family members, being sure to report these to law enforcement, and we have outstanding law enforcement agencies here in Boulder County, dedicated women and men who serve in uniform and as detectives every day, committed to upholding public safety in Boulder County. Most of the police agencies in Boulder County, and we have 8 within the county, have specially designated detectives or investigators who work on elder abuse cases. So some local demographics that I'll share with you involving elder abuse. We had 1,380 people receive services through the DA's office in some form during the time period mentioned on the screen. Female, 60 years plus, and then you see the victim categories. Now, why is elder abuse and neglect such a problem? I'm going to talk about a couple reasons, but I think if you're attending this presentation or watching the recording, you know that elder abuse and neglect is a real problem, including here in Boulder County. What are the consequences of elder abuse? Well, elder abuse triples the risk of premature death and causes unnecessary illness, injury, and trauma, including a decline in mental health. Victims of elder abuse are 4 times more likely to be admitted to a nursing home and 3 times more likely to be admitted to a hospital. And of course, the impact on one's financial resources at a time in their life when they shouldn't have to be worrying about their financial resources, where they should be able to trust those who are helping them with their financial resources. Conservative estimates value the loss at over $2.9 billion nationwide. And unfortunately, this problem is going to get worse. Why, do you ask? Well, all baby boomers are growing older, obviously, and by 2060, nearly 25% of our population will be over 65 years old here in Boulder County. The adults 65 and above in our community are the fastest growing segment of the population. And locally, the number of individuals 80 plus is expected to grow 244% by the year 2050, which is wonderful, and that's terrific. But I know you agree with me that someone who's 85, 86 years old should not have to worry about being the victim of an elder abuse, should not be victimized in these ways. So why are they prone to abuse? And I have, a bunch of things to consider, especially as you're thinking about ways to protect family members who are over 70 years old and why they might be targeted by others in their life. One is the years of wealth accumulation. As people get older, if things are going well for them, and I know that's an if, but if things are going well for them, they tend to accumulate more wealth. That's reflected in the data, which shows 70% of the nation's household wealth is controlled by those over 50 years old. Sometimes older folks may have an unfamiliarity with technological advances. So maybe they're more likely to click on that email link that says, click here. And they're unfamiliar with some of the things they could do to protect themselves and some of the things they should watch out for, such as phishing scams and the telemarketers or cell phone scams that try to take advantage of so many people, including me. I'm on the do not call list. I sometimes feel like I'm on the please call me with another scam or warranty offer right now list. And we have to do a better job as a state and as a country in dealing with that issue. But until then, we're going to continue to see older individuals in our community and in our lives being victimized by these scams. Also, sometimes older people are living in isolation and could be lonely and more willing to engage in conversations with some of these callers or individuals they meet in their daily lives who do not have best intentions at heart, especially during the pandemic. So it's been the reason why our amazing staff and community protection has been doing a lot of community outreach, including crime prevention flyers and town halls to try to get the word out about how individuals should try to protect themselves during the pandemic. We've seen an increase in crimes where the perpetrator feeds on isolation. So for example, domestic violence has gone up throughout the pandemic. And that's because the abuser is more easily able to control the victim during this time of self-isolation due to the pandemic. Also, older people may depend on others to meet their daily needs and could be suffering from cognitive decline. The financial impairment is one of the earliest symptoms of cognitive decline. And you may see that in people in your own lives, that they're having trouble remembering where their money is. They may switch from one bank to another for no real reason, but they're becoming insecure about their ability to track their finances, and they start to do things that seem strange or unusual. We'll talk about that more when we talk about red flags, because there's things we can do to prevent elder abuse. So first, recognizing, and that's why I wanted to provide that data, recognizing that elder abuse and neglect is such a widespread problem. It can happen to anybody. No family is immune from it. So knowing the risk factors, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, for victimization helps you take active steps to protect yourselves and your loved ones from elder abuse. The red flags, and then looking at any reported abuse or neglect and reporting it. So if you have someone in your family who says it's really strange, she's not letting me access my bank account anymore, you should take immediate action to report that conduct. And we'll talk more about the resources that we have here in Boulder County to respond to that kind of report. So one thing I wanted to emphasize is that as a state, we've gotten better in responding to and helping victims of elder abuse, but it's long overdue. So for example, there are what are called mandatory reporting laws in the state of Colorado for certain vulnerable groups. So for example, if a teacher believes that a child is a victim of child abuse, since 1963, the teacher has been a mandatory reporter who has to make a report. And if they fail to do so, they're actually committing a crime. So for example, if we have a principal who's aware that a child has been the victim of a sex assault, that principal has to report the crime to law enforcement. teachers, principals, and others are mandatory reporters for child abuse. In 1994, mandatory reporters were required to report domestic violence occurrences, but also domestic violence perpetrators were required to be arrested by law enforcement. Gone are the days where law enforcement would show up and tell a couple, for example, hey, knock it off, don't make me come back here. Because too often, the police failing to make an arrest would lead to tragic consequences. So in 1994, the legislature enacted a law called mandatory arrest. It's consistent with what's in place in most states in the country, where if law enforcement has probable cause to believe that someone's a victim of domestic violence, they have to, no discretion is allowed, they have to make the arrest of the offender. It was only in 2014 that mandatory reporters were required by law to report elder abuse. That mandatory reporter law, which was enacted in 2014, applies to individuals who are in banks, for example, or care facilities, people who are in positions of trust, who are observing an older person or interacting with an older person. And if they have a good faith basis to believe that an individual is a victim of elder abuse, they have to report it to Adult Protective Services or to law enforcement. That was enacted in 2014. How did we compare to other states? That's a good question. We were the 47th state to enact a mandatory reporting of elder abuse law. We were way behind the curve. I was honored to help with this effort back then in the legislature, but it was long overdue. In fact, Guam had a mandatory reporting of elder abuse law before we did. So we fell far behind not only the other states in the country, but other countries as well. But now, since 2014, Colorado's done a lot to improve the response to elder abuse. Why don't I pause here and see if Brett has any questions for me?
We don't have any that have popped up into the Q&A or the chat, but please, if you have a question, type it and we will bring it to Michael's attention.
Thank you, Brett. Okay, one thing that I really want to emphasize, I've touched on it already, but here's where the rubber hits the road, folks. Why are elder abuse and neglect so significantly underreported? In other words, it happens and no one makes a report. As you see there from some of the bullets on the slide, often individuals who are suffering from advanced cognitive decline are not able to report or participate in the prosecution when it is reported. Also, people don't want to report on family members or loved ones. And I can certainly understand that. If my brother committed a theft against me, well, I would do something about it. But I would hesitate to do something about it because he's my brother. I wouldn't want to do that to my brother. I wouldn't want to see him arrested and prosecuted. I understand that. But he also should not be stealing from me when I'm in fact his blood relative and a brother of his. We need to do something to protect the older people in our family and to make sure that justice is being done for them when they are victimized. So as hard as it is, we need to make sure we do report when it happens or when we have reason to believe it's happening. Also, older adults often express that they feel embarrassed, or they blame themselves, or fear losing their independence. In other words, we know as we get older that it's possible that individuals are going to say, we're not equipped to drive anymore. We're not equipped to take care of our own money anymore. Maybe we need to live in a nursing home or a facility and we don't want to. I understand that as a real fear that older people have because they don't want to give up their independence. They don't want to give up their quality of life. And I certainly respect that. But that should never induce someone to remain silent when they're being victimized, when things are being stolen from them, or they're being physically abused. We see these bullet points that demonstrate the factors for underreporting in the data we have from one of the studies, where 63% of older individuals polled said they did not want the police involved in their case. 74% said they did not want prosecutors involved. That's directly related to how many of these cases, how many of these crimes are being committed by family members. 3/4 of the people being victimized in this survey said they do not want prosecutors involved. It's because they don't want their family member to face the consequences. So if my uncle is being ripped off by his brother, my other uncle, he may not want to report it to law enforcement because he doesn't want to see my other uncle prosecuted and facing criminal consequences for his conduct. But I will say one thing to keep in mind is when it comes to elder abuse and neglect, these are almost never a one-time occurrence. In other words, anyone can commit a crime once, right? You may have shoplifted when you were 17. You may know someone who drove under the influence once. You may have seen a bar fight during your time. Those things could be one-time occurrences, but it's highly unusual for someone to wake up in the morning and say, you know what? I'm going to steal a couple $1,000s from grandpa today. I'm going to scam him out of the money and then never do it again. Usually these crimes are committed over and over and over again and can only be stopped by direct intervention. That's why it's so important that we report these.
And Michael, we have a couple of questions that have popped up.
Great.
One is a follow-up from the earlier discussion regarding homelessness and mental health and recidivism.
Okay.
Without a home base and a sense of purpose, has the idea of temporary housing use been addressed, such as rehab shipping containers or tractor trailers, to kind of begin housing people to get that process started?
It's a good question. And certainly homelessness continues to be a very complex problem here in Boulder County and throughout the state of Colorado. It's an issue that we come up against time and time again in our mental health diversion program. And it highlights a couple things that I really want to see our legislature do more with. The first is we rank in the bottom 10 in the country in substance abuse treatment being available in the community. We also rank in the bottom 10 in the country as a state in mental health treatment being available in the community. I think until we actually serve and support the people who live in the state, we're going to see continued struggles and homelessness for too many individuals. And the answer can't be to simply throw everybody in jail. First of all, the law doesn't allow that. Secondly, jail stays are often very short. And third, as compassionate people, we want to see long-term solutions. I want to see long-term solutions, and we're going to continue to push for those to the extent that we have control over them through the justice system. So in our programs, we talk a lot about stable housing and how to connect people with stable housing, and it remains a focus for us in restorative justice and diversion, as well as in our mental health diversion program. So I'm not involved, since the district attorney has authority over criminal offenses, so crimes that are a violation of state law. The district attorney's office is not involved in, for example, the camping ban or any municipal ordinance enacted by city council. Those are handled by what's called a city attorney. Boulder has a city attorney, Longmont, Louisville, so on. So they handle prosecutions of municipal ordinances, and I'm not directly involved in what the homeless resources are. That being said, we do take responsibility for the impact that homelessness has in criminal cases. So we have strong working relationships with Bridge House and the homeless shelter in North Boulder, as well as other programs. And we continue to build in resources in our criminal cases and diversion programs to do as well as we possibly can in responding to those issues when they come to the justice system.
Great. And we have in the chat, does everyone have a legal obligation to report elder abuse if they have a good faith basis for doing so?
Good question. Does everyone have a legal obligation? The answer is no. And I could send you, or Brett and I will put on the website where these recordings are, the list of mandatory reporters. Those are individuals who have some direct access or control over finances or health issues involving older people. So it's professionals, and it's laid out by profession. So like, for example, the law says bankers, financial institutions, and so on, and I'll get you the list. However, there's no what I would call good Samaritan law in Colorado. So if my neighbor is a victim of elder abuse, his wife is not required to report it. So my neighbor John, let's say he's a victim of elder abuse and his wife believes he's being victimized, she does not have a legal obligation. Certainly, as a person, you would hope she has a moral obligation that she follows. Similarly, if my wife observes John as a victim of elder abuse, she would not have a legal obligation. I do, because I'm listed as a mandatory reporter. So it really depends on the profession and not the relationship. There's no good Samaritan law, although I think we should all do what we can for people in our community and try to help those in our community, and especially those in our inner circle. So good question. I hope that answers it for you.
Yeah, and along those lines, the next question, the figures for elder abuse are surprising, yet knowing that the figure only considers those cases reported. realistically, what would you say is the incidence of elder abusing in total?
Well, I have the data from across the country, and Brett and I can put that on the website along with the presentation. And I have all the sources of the data. So they're all on the PowerPoint that I'm showing you. The bottom half of the screen, which you can't see, has the sources for each one of the data points that I'm hitting on. So let me know if you have specific questions about where we get the data from. I would say elder abuse is a prevalent issue and a real problem. And we see it very, very often. Those 613 cases I referenced from 1 year, those are cases that we actually prosecuted. So it's not even counting reports that did not lead to criminal charges. So in a community as large as Boulder County or as small as Boulder County, the fact that we have such a large number of cases really, to me, reflects the degree and depth of the problem. It happens far too often.
Okay, and one final question in the chat. In our senior apartment, we see adults go into dementia and managers ignore this. And I'm going to skip over a few of the details. Residents are afraid to report, managers ignore the issues. In this case, who has the legal onus to report?
So certainly the caregivers who work there are mandatory reporters, and they have the legal responsibility of reporting. And it's not sufficient for an individual in that position to say the boss doesn't want me to. It's incumbent upon each mandatory reporter to actually make the report. And I would encourage people to do that, even if it's an anonymous report that you then document that you made. That would go a long way, because you would invite a site visit by some of the state officials responsible for care facilities. Our office would be happy to help you. And we have a woman named Desiree, who I believe is in the Zoom room with us right now. If you contact the Community Protection Division, Desiree can help connect you with resources that would assist in making sure that the care facility had a site visit and a review of what's going on there completed.
Okay, and I think that is it for right now.
All right, thank you, Brett. Thanks for the great
Welcome.
questions, everybody. So let's touch quickly on the risk factors for victimization. What puts someone at risk of being a victim of elder abuse? If they're going through a cognitive decline, so for example, my father, who has since passed, he was such a smart and great person, just a wonderful guy. He had had a stroke, a couple major health episodes, but he had a stroke once, and he came out of the coma after the stroke, and he kept telling me that if I didn't pay his life insurance bill, he was going to lose $8 million. And I remember that figure because he said it every time I saw him in the hospital. He'd be like, did you get the life insurance bill paid? It's $8 million I'm going to lose. And I kept saying, I don't know what you're talking about. I've gone through all the bills. I have your checkbook. There's no life insurance policy for which you make monthly payments. And there's certainly no $8 million life insurance policy that you have. There's no way you have that money. But he was adamant, because at the time he was going through cognitive decline. And thankfully, once he got through that health episode, he did get better. But during that time, he easily could have been victimized. Also, people at an increased age are shown to be at a greater risk for victimization. Individuals who perhaps have not had as much education or don't have as vast a social network or support. Also, someone who requires assistance for daily living is more likely to trust another individual, particularly someone in their family, to take care of their finances and their well-being. We already talked about isolation and loneliness, but also prior trauma or abuse are risk factors for victimization. And as I touched on, the pandemic has certainly increased the stress and isolation for older adults. So if we're to take a takeaway from this, just on a personal level, would be to reach out to the older adults in your life after this presentation and just check on them and see how they're doing. It helps their mental health, it helps their support, and it reduces the likelihood that they'll ever be victimized. So if you're worried they might be a victim, if you're starting to see those red flags, what do those look like? Well, someone who's not treating an older adult well, someone threatening to withhold care in order to achieve a desired benefit. Also, someone in the older adult's life who expresses a sudden and newfound interest in their finances, as well as attempting to access that person's finances. So let's say, for example, your cousin is helping out with a grandparent, and you realize that the cousin is suddenly trying to access a bank account, or the older person is telling you, yeah, the cousin wants access to my bank account. I got to give him my PIN number so you can go check on my account balance for me. He's very worried about my account balance, so I have to give him my PIN number. That would be a red flag immediately and should prompt a conversation. And if the conversation doesn't produce satisfactory responses that make you convinced that there's nothing going on, that to me is something where you want to make a report. Someone trying to isolate the older individual from the family and from friends. Of course, unexplained injuries or damage to personal property are red flags. And a sudden inability to manage finances. These are all red flags that you see on the screen here. We have a couple more that I'll hit on. Poor hygiene, unkempt clothes, inadequate food or nutrition. These are things to be on the lookout. If you see someone in your family who's demonstrating that they have one or more of these red flags, I really encourage you to take action or to reach out to law enforcement, adult protective services, and the district attorney's office. So we make sure that the person's getting the help and support they need. Not every report leads to an arrest. Not every arrest leads to a criminal conviction and a period of incarceration. So taking that first step is a step you're taking to protect a loved one. It's the compassionate and right thing to do. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the other person's life, the person against whom the report is made, is going to be ruined, but rather it gives us an opportunity to ensure that the loved one, the older person, is not being victimized. Here are some safety tips for you.
And before we get to that, we do have one question. The writer says, I have had the occasion to use a consumer protection unit before. You do an amazing job. But given the tsunami of seniors retiring, is council considering using some of the $63 million coming in from the federal government, giving you the support now that you will need, considering the loss of tax base from retiring seniors and the demands for increase in services that follows hand in hand?
That is a great question. And I really appreciate the positive feedback for our community protection unit. Thank you for that. And I should have you at our budget presentation of the county commissioners, because it's exactly what we've been talking to the county commissioners about. They're the ones who set our budget here at the district attorney's office. We are an independent state office, but as with every DA's office in the state, we're funded by the counties within our jurisdiction. I'm really grateful that we have a strong working relationship with the Boulder County commissioners, and we'll continue to emphasize the need for us to do this kind of work. And you making that comment is something that, believe me, I will pass along to them, because you're absolutely right. We need to continue to expand and build upon the resources that we have, since we're going to see the number of seniors increase in the community and for the other reasons you hit on. So thank you for that question, and we'll definitely continue to emphasize the need for more resources in that area, and I promise you we'll do that. Some safety tips. Make sure you're on the do not call list. I joke that they're not 100% effective, and that's certainly true. But to the extent that they are effective, it's a good thing to make sure you and your loved ones are on the do not call list. Just hang up on telemarketers. I tend to be a very nice person. I was about to say I think, but I'm just going to say I'm a very nice person. So if people call me, I don't usually hang up on them. Telemarketers, I do. There's nothing to be gained by staying on the phone. So I'll just nicely say, I'm not interested, but thank you. Have a great day. Because that person's usually trying to do their job. But some of these calls we get are fraudsters. So never engaging in it. And it can be really frightening. You get a call saying, you haven't paid your mortgage bill. You haven't paid your insurance bill. And that rattles everyone, including the district attorney. I mean, I myself, even though I know these are scams, I get nervous when I get those calls. But I also know they're scams. So I hang up right away. They know your name, but they do not have your best interest at heart. And if you have an older one in your life, what can you do about this? Here's a practical tip. Put a note on the fridge, hang up the phone. And you have a conversation with them. Hang up the phone anytime it's a telemarketer, anytime it's a survey, anytime it's someone saying, oh, I have a question about your credit card bill, or I'm calling from Social Security. You can tell your loved one, for example, and I think Desiree and Christian covered this during their presentation. They're folks from our community protection division, and they presented just a couple weeks ago for Senior Law Day. The Social Security Department never calls you. They only communicate by letter. So if someone calls saying they're with Social Security, hang up the phone. And I think that's a really important message for all of us, but especially for the older folks in our lives. Never give out personal information on the phone. I won't even do it, even if I know the person. Now, yeah, that's a little paranoid, of course, but I'm a prosecutor, so. But for example, if my law school calls me for a donation, I'll agree to give the donation and I'll say, but I need you to mail it to me and I'll mail you something back. I don't give out my credit card number on the phone. So maybe you don't have to take it to the extreme that I do, but I'm really careful about never giving personal information out over the phone. I want to see it on paper. I want to see something in the mail, even if it's a organization, charitable organization that my wife and I donate to. I'll ask them, can you please send it to me in the mail, and I'll give what I gave last year. And then I do, but I don't give it out my credit card information or my social security number over the phone ever. One thing to be careful about is emails claiming you owe money or that you have to give money and asking you to click on a link. Just clicking on the link can damage your computer. So never click on those links. Make sure you monitor your bills and your credit card activity. So if you get your bank statement, go through it line by line just to make sure that you've actually spent the money in the way that's described. Often fraudsters, as a first step to a wider scam, will do a test where they say, they do a, for example, a $7 theft, because they're looking to see if you're spotting it or not. So make sure you monitor your bills and your credit card activity. When in doubt, ask for help. Who do you ask for help? Well, you can report to Adult Protective Services in Boulder County, and the numbers there on your screen. Of course, in an emergency, please call 911 and talk to law enforcement. It's more important now than ever that we report elder abuse and neglect, especially during the pandemic. We've seen a lot of cases involving financial fraud and theft, on the increase due to the financial stress that people are feeling during the pandemic. It's inexcusable, but that is likely one of the reasons we're seeing an increase in property crimes committed throughout the state of Colorado, including fraud and theft. So what are we doing here in the DA's office? Well, these cases are a priority throughout the pandemic and beyond, and I promise you we're here for anything you need. Any question you have, do not hesitate to reach out to us. We're going to continue to do community outreach for all the reasons I touched on earlier. We're also doing updated training materials and presentations for financial institutions on mandatory reporting and suspected financial exploitation so that they can continue to join us in the fight against elder abuse. So my time is just about up. We have 3 minutes left. Why don't I stop here and see if you have any questions at all?
Well, and I am going to share my screen just real quick to get us back. This is the website for the Community Protection Unit. There is tons of information on there, particularly as it relates to some of the COVID issues. And then I'm going to go back to our sponsor slide to thank our sponsors again. But please, if anyone has any final questions for Michael, the chat is open and available, and the Q&A is available. I feel like we've had a lot of really good questions throughout. I've really enjoyed seeing these responses.
No, I agree, Brett. These questions have been terrific. And if there's more information you have, for example, the question about the senior apartment, if you have concerns or you need more information from us, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are here to serve our community. We're honored to do so. The work here for the District Attorney's Office is incredibly meaningful and fulfilling. I love the work we're doing, and do not hesitate to call upon us to do whatever we can to help you and your loved ones.
Oh, and we do have one in the Q&A.
I can see it now, Brett.
Oh, good.
So the question, just so all of you know, it says, I understand that scammers, once they have a signature that they can use, they can lift that signature and use it to take my property. What can I do to protect my home from being taken? Thank you so much for that question. I'm also going to have Brett weigh in if Brett, you want to, but
sure.
Only because it says Brett would like to answer this question live. Although maybe
no, I'm just indicating that you're answering it live.
So a couple things I do to limit how likely it is that someone could commit fraud. And these are just things I do in my own life. I shred or rip up any mail that I get so that I'm careful about what's ending up in my garbage, because there's some dumpster diving that still takes place. Where we see people being victimized more often, though, is through computers. So a lot of the folks who used to take things from the mail or from dumpsters are now doing so through our computers. So personally, I'll just tell you, I don't pay any bill through an electronic account. I still mail a check-in, and maybe you've taken the step of doing it by direct withdrawal from your bank, and I respect that. But that's where you want to make sure that when you're doing your banking online, you want to make sure that you're locking down who has access to that and that you're only using trusted websites for it. So that's one thing that I would stress, is thinking about how much access people have to your finances through computers. I also would suggest that you visit the district attorney website. We have a list of common scams and what you can do to protect yourself from those scams on our website. We also have Desiree on this call. She works here in the DA's office. She's terrific. If you call her at 303-441-3700, Desiree can provide you with some additional tips. And you see there on the screen now all the safety bulletins from the district attorney's office and things you could do to protect yourself and your loved ones.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This is just such a wonderful opportunity to get to hear from our elected district attorney and really learn about this incredibly important topic and some of the ins and outs. And we do have one additional question. Can I contact the city property department and add some type of precautions to ensure backup?
You certainly can. And I would encourage you to reach out to us directly so we could talk offline with you and provide more direction and also connect you with additional resources, because it sounds like you have some specific concerns. So if you're willing to, I'd love for you to call us here at the district attorney's office, ask to talk to our community protection division, and they'll be able to address your specific concerns and provide you with more direct safety tips.
Great.
Okay. Well, Brett and Brett's colleagues, I really appreciate you and all you do. So thank you for making this Senior Law Day possible for us here in Boulder County.
Absolutely.
I was honored to participate and here to serve. So feel free to call upon us for anything you need.
And one final question.
Sure.
I love what you do. How would I go about joining forces? So I think you had mentioned volunteers earlier.
That's right. Thank you so much. Our restorative justice and diversion program has a volunteer education program as part of it. So you go through a couple hours of training and then you can participate in restorative justice and diversion. And you might be interested in our volunteer program within our victim witness unit, where volunteers help us connect to victims, provide them with the resources and support that they need when they've been victimized. So whether it's for restorative justice and diversion or our victim witness unit, we would love to have your help. And again, that number that I gave you that's available on our website as well, you can contact to be connected with the folks who run the volunteer program here at the DA's office.
And just so I can type that into the chat, what was that number again?
303-441-3700.
Great. So that number is in the chat. And thank you so much.
Thank you. And everyone have a great day. You take care.
Bye.